If you look at this data and you haven't done a single thing to correct it, the term is called racism, however else you want to couch it, right? I don't want you to succeed, but I want you to try something, and I want you to fail. And I want you to come and tell all of us what you've failed at, so we don't tell everybody else to do the same thing over and over again, so failure keeps on happening. That's what I want.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you believe it? We're at the penultimate session of this absolutely fantastic day. And we have an NHS England clinical lead for this penultimate session. So for those of you who don't know Professor Partha Kar, I want to introduce him. The National Speciality Advisor for Diabetes, NHS England. He's the Type 1 Diabetes and Technology Lead for NHS England and co-lead of Getting It Right First Time. You've heard quite a bit about that today. He's a consultant in diabetes and endocrinology in Portsmouth. And again, if you're on the social medias, the WhatsApp, then you'll know that he's pioneered the expansion of diabetes technology in the NHS, including flash glucose, CGM, for all people living with type 1 diabetes, CGM in pregnancy, and access to hybrid closed loops. Again, we've heard quite a bit about that today. He's currently leading a 5-year HCL implementation plan, making the NHS a global leader in diabetes technology access. And we've already got a question lined up for you, Partha, to ask you about the DVLA and CGM. So if you could address that for us later. He also introduced frailty into the quality of frameworks target, launched dysbulimia pilot projects, champions language matters to promote respectful communication in diabetes care, and co-developed peer support. And you did a comic as well, didn't you? Yeah, on top of everything else. He's been awarded an OBE in 2021 for his services to diabetes care and is recognised as one of the UK's most influential minoritised, I'm going to say, ethnic minority healthcare leaders. So Partha is going to talk to us for about 30 minutes, but we will have time for questions. Thanks, Partha.
Thank you, Joan. And first of all, it's been a long day, right? Did you enjoy it? Yes. There you go. So I'm also going to say a big thank you to Bernadette. Bernadette, if you haven't met her yet, for everything she's organized, Greg and everybody. So I think this is great to have these sort of events. But what I'll do, I'll just give you a brief overview where we are and take some questions, right? So, anybody got type 1 diabetes in the room? Okay. Anybody with a family who's got type 1 diabetes? Excellent. So none of you will answer the question I'm going to ask you right now, okay? Close your eyes for a minute and think about your most loved one in your life, all right? Son, daughter, husband, wife, if you're so inclined, your mother-in-law, whatever you want. If they have type 1 diabetes, would you like them to have CGM? Would you like them to have a hybrid closed loop? Right. So there is a saying which says, think like a patient and act like a taxpayer, right? And that's what public fund is all about. So you answered the first question. You thought like a patient. You want your loved one to have these devices. The next question comes, can the public taxpayer fund it? Is it worth enough funding? That's the way to look at things. And I always look at type 1. Those of you in the audience who've got family or live with it themselves, this is all important. But the most important bit is the last line, which is for the rest of your life, all the time. Type 1 diabetes, I've been doing type 1 diabetes care for 16 years or so, excluding my training years. And type 1 diabetes to me is very simple. It's an unremitting, unforgiving condition. It's at you all the time, just at you, right? So that's the problem whenever we ask people questions, why isn't things getting better? Do you know what the number is? Those who haven't seen it before, it's not the level of satisfaction staff have with the NHS, right? That's way too high, right? That's the amount of time somebody with type 1 diabetes has with their clinician in their lives. That's an overestimate, actually. That's all they have. And if you're not sure about the maths behind it, let's say you've got 4 meetings a year, nobody does. Let's say each meeting is half an hour, nobody does. That's 2 hours out of 8,760 hours in a year. That's 0.02%. So 99.99%, that person lives on their own, right? So on top of that, we have this problem. You've seen this slide probably already, right? And I always use this slide to explain something, not to show what's right, what's wrong, but I'll tell you my experience. I've been doing a national role for 9 years now. It's been fun. But I always tell people, how can you challenge people without people getting defensive, right? So there's two messages I want to always convey from this slide. Number one, deprivation and issues with racial gaps are not the one and same problem. They're not. And I've done this dance so many times over. When I've been to meetings, people go like, but they're the same. And I went like how? And they go like, I said, how do you explain this? And they went like, well, black people are poor. I went like, every one of them. Every single, what you do by that statement, apart from your bias, you have been incredibly unfair to a lot of white poor children. That's all you've done there. That's all you've done. You made it unfair for everybody, right? And there's a second thing about how you respect and how you can have respectful conversation, but at the same time challenging, not shying away. When I first time showed this slide in the public domain, right, well, you can see a black child had half the chance of a white child, half. It wasn't decimal points, but half. And I remember showing this graph, and a pediatric colleague put his or her hand up and said, I find this really offensive. I said, why do you find it offensive? You're not even a child. Neither do you have type 1 diabetes. Why are you offended? And I said, I find it offensive because it feels like you're calling me a racist. And I still remember my answer. I always remember saying that to him or her, and I said, I'm not yet. Because here is my philosophy. If you look at this data and you haven't done a single thing to correct it, the term is called racism, however else you want to couch it, right? I don't want you to succeed, but I want you to try something, and I want you to fail. And I want you to come and tell all of us what you failed at, so we don't tell everybody else to do the same thing over and over again, so failure keeps on happening. That's what I want. I want you to look at the data, go back and go like, this isn't right. And I'm going to try different things. You're not going to be challenged on not doing the right thing. You're going to be challenged on not doing anything. Because if you feel, yeah, black child, white child, meh, half, all right, the term is racism. And if we shy away from those conversations, then we'll never be able to close the gap. So this is the story of 2017 in the NHS, not that long ago. There was no Freestyle Libre. It had come out in the US in 2014, and we didn't have any. Type 1 diabetes wasn't a national focus. We didn't have an audit. Those were the sort of uptakes. People always say about, oh, all we need is NICE. Nonsense. We've had a NICE TA on pumps since 2008, right? That doesn't change things. Just having a NICE category doesn't change things. So those of you know what this means. This is a gentleman, those of you don't understand football, but he's a very famous football coach. But forget about it. I've had this on my wall since 2016. He joined Liverpool Football Club in 2015. And he said these words when he came to join the club. When he left, it was not about what he had won, because he could have won more. But it was about what he left the club with, which was belief, that we could do things differently. We could win. We could win again, right? I've had this always in my life. And people always say to me, oh, come and talk to us about leadership skills. That's it. If you walk away from your job and you made other people believe that you can do things, you've succeeded, right? It's not always about the outcomes. And this is a line which, shared with permission, this is something on Instagram from a mum. And I think that crystallizes one of the challenges parents have when you got little ones, type 1, right? That's what we're trying to improve as we're going along. So we changed strategy, and here is my view, and everybody knows me, and we were talking about this outside, and people go like, do you feel uncomfortable when people say, we don't like your style? I said, well, they're not my mom or dad, so in which case I don't really care, right? And they go, but they're not going to become your friends. And I said, but they were never my friends. They were my colleagues. People need to I always say to everybody, you're my colleagues. We can work together to make things better. Don't give me this gaslighting about, but you're not my friend. You weren't invited to my Christmas party anyway, so relax, right? And similarly, I think if you look at a lot of the work that happens in this space, and we have had this conversation with Bola and others who say that here is some data, can you please do better, is not a strategy, right? All it will do is shift the dial on people who are already committed. The people you need to challenge are not challenged, right? Is that my phone? I do apologize. Yeah, sorry about that. It's a bit of Stevie Wonder never hurts anybody, but there we go. Right. So here is some data. Accountability is very important. And I think understanding psychology of people, and I'll come to that in a minute. But what we have done is build a community of people with type 1 diabetes. That's what we have done. And I'm very public. People always say that. I'm everywhere. You name a social media channel, I'm on it. Doesn't matter. I do blogs, I do podcasts, I meet everybody, I will talk to anybody, I will literally put out emails. Everybody's saying, go like, if you're not getting something, come to me. Every single time, there are lots of clinicians get emails from me going like, what's happening? And I will challenge every single one. You need only to make an example of 3, 4, 5, and it changes. And we've done that throughout the course of time. But one of the big things about the community of people living with type 1 diabetes and their carers is they're one of your best weapons to cut across gaps. Because people with type 1 diabetes are much less fussed. They find out other people for you, whatever the community. Doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. They're much better at it. And that's much better, much more freelance in moving across communities than the NHS can do. So, where are we now? This is where we are now. 97 to 98% of type 1 diabetes people have got a continuous glucose monitor in this country. There is no country in the world which is at this level. Number one, numero uno, right? You've clapped before I came to my kill line. But I think the important things there is what has happened. And I think we're very proud about some of the outcomes starting to come out now. And I always talk about HbA1c improvement is great, looks good. But to have data which is now showing that pregnancy, if you look at pregnancy outcomes in the NHS, go and look at the data sheet. Pregnancy outcomes in the NHS is really bad. We know about maternal mortality rate, black women know all the stories, except if you've got type 1 diabetes. Go and have a look. Except if you've got type 1 diabetes. Our fetal malformations are dropped, our neonatal admissions have dropped, everything has gone the right way for the first time. What did we do different? We just gave them a continuous... Those of you women in the audience will know this. Pregnancy is difficult enough. Asking women to check it 8 times a day and make every change is super difficult. Give them a device so they can do it better. It's honestly not rocket science. So, is it possible? And I was talking about this, what is equality? What is equality? I really don't have time for any of these terms because I've got a very simple philosophy. Give it to everybody. Give it to everybody, everybody will get it. Just stop all this divide, just give it. I want my overall percentage in this country to get to 98. When you get to 98, do you know what happens? There are no gaps because everybody's got it. How can you have a gap when everybody's got it? So I keep on saying to people, I don't care. So you see the gaps at the beginning? They all come down because you keep challenging. I just want your percentage up. You're at 60, why are you stuck? And I know why you're stuck because you haven't reached out to certain populations. I don't care, just get it up. I want you to get it to 65, 70. So you're pushing people to get the overall percentage up and guess what? Everybody gets it. We're very proud of this. This is another set of data from the pregnancy. The color of your skin does not matter. That's how the NHS should be. And right in the audience, we've got Karen Kennedy, who you might have heard from today, but or not. She's one of our team people who has led a lot of the pregnancy work. But that's amazing, right? Offering the same rejection. That is how a national health service should work. Why should it be? And I have had plenty of excuses. And it's about belief and culture and presumptions or what a woman may or may not like. And I've had some, I'm not going to even go through all of them, but I've had some amazing presumptions when you ask people, why is it low? And I said, why have you not offered it to any of the black women in your area? Oh, they may not like it. Well, how do you know? Have you offered it? No, we're not sure they will like it. And I went like, but you haven't even asked them. No. And I went like, ask them, right? Ask them a simple question. Do you want to prick your finger 8 times a day? Want a device that you don't need to? I'm pretty sure they're not going to go like, do you know what I really fancy? Yeah, pricking myself 8 times a day. That sounds amazing. Have a discussion, right? So this came out, nice, had a bit closed loops, you heard enough about it, so what's going to happen. But I think what's quite exciting and important is the pace at which we are starting to work. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but in simple, plain terms, we have rolled out money, this, that, structures, etc., national funding, guidance issued, technology usage. So basically, we're doing a lot of work every month. It's coming out saying, this is the money, this is the thing, this is the driving, and we've got processes in place, we track everybody. But I want to show you this about, this is what I call moments in time. Have a look at this graph. This is your country. Every single person with type 1 diabetes is mapped. Pediatric, adults. First, kudos, best practice tariff. Pediatric teams brought it thanks to Fiona Campbell and her team, came out in 2014. You can see what happened, a big jump. Degree of plateau, then came CGM. Next move. Now, hybrid closed loop, led by Fulia and others, 6 months. Biggest shift in HbA1c improvement across the country you'll ever see. The whole country's median has come down across the board. It's unreal. We have never seen anything ever like this, okay? Adults, flat CGM, and we're just about to kick off with HCL. So can we get to a place where things can get much, much better? 100%. Where are we right now? So just to give you an example of how far we have progressed, there is a particular website you can have a look at. It's called the T1D Index, right? What it measures is how many healthy year lives do you lose if you've got type 1 diabetes, right? What does healthy year lives mean? You don't have complications, you have nothing going on. Disparity, it maps out every country in the world. Just to give you an idea, if you come from India, do you know what it is? 45. You lose 45 years of healthy life if you've got type 1 diabetes, right? What do you think it's in Ghana? 47, right? Then you move into Europe and things start to shift because economies of scale, money, how it works. So Germany, 17. See the difference suddenly? Where you live suddenly changes things. So we are very, very proud the UK is now pretty much top of the tree, at par with France. We're at 14. Still 14, but we can get it down to single figure. That's the sort of aim, right? So what are we doing here? So I've always said this, chronic disease is based on 3 pillars, any chronic disease, which is self-management, peer support, and access to trained professionals. Do you know what the NHS does all the time? We'll get you more trained professionals. Then they run out of trained professionals. What is the next thing they do? They steal it from other countries. Then they run out of that as well. Then what do they do? Then they get professionals not trained. And you're sitting around going like, what is going on, right? Well, if you live with a chronic disease 99.9% of your time and you improve their self-management, things get better. Continuous glucose monitors is not rocket science. Go and talk to anybody who uses it. They will just tell you, it just made my life simpler. So if your life is simpler, your quality of life is better, your control gets better. It's like really not that complicated, if you think about it. And peer support, so under-recognized. Who can do better support about what you should have after a nightclub than somebody with type 1 diabetes who has done that journey many times 3 o'clock in the morning? Yeah? Because they're telling you about the cheesy chips, right? While the official websites are telling you should make yourself a bowl of pasta, and you're going like, okay, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm in no shape to make a bowl of pasta here, right? But cheesy chips, I'm on it. What does the other thing do when you say cheesy chips? Do you know what it does do? It makes you feel no different from the other people you've gone out with. They're not like, oh, I can't have that, I'll have something at home, yeah? While all your friends are like having the cheesy chips, you're part of them. There's no difference, right? It's important. Peer support, very important, under-recognized. But I always loved this. And this was such kudos. You remember that graph I showed you, CGM? I showed the pediatric community. You bunch of people, black children, half. How dare you? Well, let's look at what they're doing with deprivation now. Deprivation is absolutely razor tight. Look at that from pediatric. Okay? So I need to finish the story. That pediatrician who said to me, I think you're calling me a racist, said to me, I'll show you. We'll come back and have a chat. And I love that. I want people to come around and prove me wrong. And in fairness to him or her, they have. Look at that ethnicity gap in CGM. That's pretty razor tight, yeah? 94, 94, 91, I'm good. You're doing exceedingly well, right? But you keep challenging. And what do you always say to people? Listen, guys, if you've done that with CGM, you're going to do it with HCL, right? Because you're moving. The numbers are closer. But let's close it. And I can tell you, so we've just ticked past nearly 50% of all children in this country are now on a hybrid closed loop. 50% are on an artificial pancreas. There are people right now diagnosed with type 1 diabetes who will never know what it is to prick their fingers on a regular basis, never know what it is to inject. What a country. Amazing, right? We'll have people in clinic who look at you strangely. They're like, what do you mean? Right? It's a bit like, let me give you an example. Who in the room remembers having to go to the bank to deposit your money? Hands up, you will not reveal your age. Go on. I can also tell you, in this room, there are people sitting at going like, what do you mean? Isn't it? Some of the people are going like physically money? Put it somewhere in? How many years ago was it that you had to go and buy a plane ticket? Remember that with the paper? What is that all about, right? So technology is going to the space, isn't it? So wouldn't it lovely for people to go like, so yesterday I saw a gentleman, I put a picture of this gentleman up on social media. He came in as a type 1 diabetes of 64 years. And he was like, this thing, it's amazing, isn't it? I was like, tell me a little, because I love hearing stories of had type 1 for a long time. And they tell you about what they've done for them. People who are starting afresh will not get it. But people who've had it, they go like, okay, this is ridiculous. And I'll give you a very good example. When we were doing the hybrid closed loop pilot, I still remember a lovely line from a parent. And we were asking, what did you like about it? And this mum said, right, less beeping, more sleeping, very important. And I said, tell me a little bit more. What does it do? He said, I go to work, not tired. I'm not always thinking about my child, right? I've been awake till 4 o'clock in the morning in case the blood sugar drops, but I can sleep, right? I'm trying to kick my dog. They're like, come on, you're supposed to be a hypo dog. What's happening? Right? So some other facts is that CGM is now standard care for type 1 diabetes across all ages in this country. That's it. It's standard care, right? You cannot, if you're not on a CGM or you've got type 1 diabetes, something's not off. And that's such an amazing statement to make because I have taken on a big role in India right now. And those of you who come from India, India is a very interesting country. Like there's two Indias, right? There's an India which can afford everything, better than the NHS. And there's an India where I went to, where we met this, we went to this place, right? Where all the kids were like really short. I was like, oh, why are they all short? What's going on? The reason is they don't have anywhere to freeze their insulin. So they have to ration their insulin. And the only way they can do it is by taking out all the carbs from the kids. There's no carbs. And they have little insulins. Right? So when I come off the plane and somebody emails me, I'd just like to say it's an absolute outrage. I haven't got this particular type of loop. I always write back saying, okay, I always say that. I said, thank you very much for your email. I think what's happening in the Middle East is an outrage. I don't think what you describe is an outrage. It's called a shame at best. We're working towards it. It's fine. Okay? So that's important. Insulin pump, standard care for type 1 diabetes, for children with type 1 diabetes, right? All 64% of kids are on pumps. Of them, as I said, we're at 50%, we just crossed past 50%. And look at that, that's where the pump uptake was. This is what the progress has been, right, in the last 4 or 5 years, which you have all contributed to. All I did is send a few emails and shout at a few people. But that's amazing, right? So I think you've heard a lot throughout today about what things need to change. I also want you to take away the hope and the message as to what the NHS can do. Same NHS, right? When people come to me, oh my God, it's very difficult to tackle inequalities. Nah, you're not trying hard enough. People are very difficult to find. Nah, you're not looking enough. Have you heard the term, right? Difficult to reach. Nah, you aren't trying hard enough. What do you mean? They're not like if you're living in a cave. They're not like Batman, right? What do you mean they're difficult to reach? What, do they not have phones? What is happening? It's nonsense. All these terms are nonsense. Difficult to reach. And people come up with these terms, right? So I'm going to give you a very good example. Those of you who have seen this, I'm going to share this with you. Some of you have seen this. The NHS does all these. I don't mind. I don't even care anymore at this stage of my career. The NHS does all this lip service to about tackling racism, right? And they go, every few months you'll go like hashtag racism, new points, PowerPoint. It's like fantastic. And I think the Race Observer has done another principles, 10 principles. I just wrote back saying, it looks the same cut and paste from 10 years ago. What's happening? Anyway. So this is the workforce, race equality. So we produce it every year, right? You can see that. If you are like, yeah, I mean, something happens at the banding, isn't it? Nobody progresses. I mean, I don't know what happens. Yeah, you're just not qualified enough. Well, whatever. That data hasn't shifted in 10 years. So when people go like, we're really working hard, I'm going like, well, I don't think you're trying hard enough. Okay, same pattern. Bullying, career progression. I mean, we produce this every year, right? Every year, everybody goes like, oh, it's an absolute shame. It's a real shame. We need to work together. And we have some PowerPoints and we have some policies and principles and nothing changes. And you go like, well, okay, I think that's called failure. And they go like, no, it's not failure. We're working towards it. Okay. I did, apart from diabetes, because I got bored with diabetes, I did this work where I looked at it in the medical workforce. What's happening in the medical workforce? Surely medics, we are amazing. We love each other. Not really. All of those things matter if you are non-white, but more so if you come from a black community. GMC referrals. So I work with the GMC, those of you who don't know, yeah? And I look at referrals and inequity. Oh, I can tell you stories. It's amazing. Color of your skin matters, full stop. Anybody's telling you otherwise, I work for the GMC, is lying, right? So all of those matters, which is good. So we made some plans. We love making plans. And we talked about steps. I'm not going to bore you with that. But now we got a new thing, right? And this is a very important point. When you put everything into one basket, yeah, called equality and diversity, you tackle nothing. Because the way, if somebody believes that the way to tackle sexism and racism is the same, they're playing with words. Every woman in the audience knows this. It's a disrespectful thing if you're trying to tackle homophobia. Every single protected characteristic is not one lump box. Can't do it. It's impossible. This is all PowerPoint work. So, anyway, I'm going to finish with this just to give you some advice about how you tackle these things. And this is relevant. Some of you have heard this last year, so I'm going to say it again for those of you who haven't. I'm going to give you the example of sexism. There are lots of women in the room. You have met these 4 groups of men in your life. They're with you every day, and you still work with them. There's the first group of men. When you tell the word sexist, they go, it's very, very bad. Very bad. Sexism is very bad. We are right by you. Most women are going, excellent. Just turn up when there's the need. The second group of men who's going like, yeah, well, it used to be. Is it really a problem nowadays? You know, is it? And most women are going like, oh, come on, man. Just look around. I mean, how many more data sheets do you need? And I go, I think what you need to do is collect some more data. And most women are going, what? One more? Okay. Then you've got a third group of men who are going like, is this like really important? Is this like a politically correct thing to do? Should I like stand by women nowadays? But the reason I always say this, the fourth group of men who genuinely believe you should be cooking, be in a kitchen and not come to work and not be in leadership roles. You work with them. That's why the NHS has sexism, right? Racism is no different. I work with them, for all 4 of them, all the time. I've had people in my life who really like me for who I am, people who don't believe that racism exists. I keep on producing data. People who join me because they go, Partha Kar is there, so maybe I should go and say hello to him, all right? And the fourth group of people who genuinely believe that I'm not qualified enough. I'm not as clever as them. Fine, that's how life is. I have no problem with that. You just make sure you don't... What is our job is to make sure these people are not in roles of responsibility and hampering everybody else. That's all you need to do. So I always say, remember the 4 groups and you need to have a strategy for each of them, yeah? How you deal with them. Do you know what we tend to do? Most of the time we're trying to convince group 4 whether sexism, racism is a bad thing. They don't believe you. It doesn't matter. How are you going to convince a man who genuinely believes that you should be just cooking? What are you going to show them? They're just like, don't believe it. I've had people who come to me and say, I just don't think you are clever. And I'm like, what? This is the thing my mum used to say. I'm not sure why you're saying this, right? Okay? So it's what it is, right? So I'll finish with these things. And I always say this to a lot of academics all the time. And I would encourage you all, when you're doing work to science, to change things, is work with policy people. It's a bit like I do teaching for medical students. And I always ask them a question. What's the best medicine in the world, right? And people come up with answers. Aspirin, insulin, penicillin. And I go, like, no, none of them. And they go, oh, they're thinking I'm going to have a magic word. I go, no, it's the one the patient takes. The rest of it is just sitting on the shelf. So somebody came up to me, that's just a daft comment. And I went like, well, it's true though. That's the best drug. If you can't get them to take their insulin, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter what the science says. Similarly, if you see what we've done in the type 1 diabetes or the diabetes program is try and get science into lives, whether it's the remission program, direct study, whether it's the pregnancy work, by the concept, now the hybrid closed loops, or the ADAPT, that's what we're trying to do. Get the science into lives. That's how you change things. So what are the challenges ahead? Battle in CGM is over. I think that's done. That's cooked. We got everybody. It's fine. HCL work is the next arena. Pediatrics are showing the way, led by Fulia. And that's brilliant. I think we need to learn from that in the adult world. Young type 2 diabetes is going to be a big challenge area. There are more people with type 2 diabetes below the age of 40 than type 1 diabetes in this country. Now, I was just talking to our team outside. What I was saying to them is that the NHS can't solve type 2 diabetes, can it? It's a societal problem of deprivation issues. You have to work with governments to tackle that. Just throwing drugs at people ain't going to sort it. So that's a big challenge. And I think you need to challenge yourself, ourselves. I think every day in your work, I think you need to think about, am I doing the right thing? Keep your biases aside. Just do that challenge. Have I done, would I, and I always use the question, have I done what I would do for my loved one with the person in front? Have I done enough? Okay? So when you retire, and we all will retire, what's the thing that will please you the most? It will be something you go, did I do some good? Did I leave some legacy? Right? It's not going to be the cheap clock that your trust or GP surgery gives you, is it? It's going to be something nice to sort of take away. And that's important. And I think that's what you need to challenge yourself. Challenge others. Racism isn't going, it's never going to go away. This is nonsense, right? If Martin Luther King didn't manage it, we have no hope, right? This is happening. We have to deal with it, right? And I think we also need to be very brave to talk about that racism isn't a white and non-white discussion. I come from an Asian culture. Do you know what we have? Very good. We really don't like slightly more colored people than us. I know it. My mum went through it because mum was very dark, right? I saw it when I was little, right? Real tough comments she used to get because she was not fair enough, right? Go to adverts in India. It's all about, everybody's looking for a fair woman, which is quite ironic because the fair women are actually this country. And you go like, wow, guys, what are you doing, right? Anti-blackness is a big thing in the South Asian community. A lot of people will say it's bigger than what you find in the white community. If we're not brave enough to say these, if we're not brave enough to say that the South Asian community really struggles with misogyny, anti-blackness, you have a problem because you're not turning up and saying, turning this into a white, non-white debate polarizes it, doesn't take you anywhere. Doesn't, right? And I think that's quite important to remember. As I said, principles and PowerPoints don't change data. So our success has been down to the fact that we've had an amazing team who've driven, chased, hunted. You have to do that. So accountability is the glue. Ties a commitment to his result, which is a very important thing, I always say. And I finish with this saying, I really, really believe in this, is that you have to go away from this meeting believing that the next step of change, you want to come back next year. Greg and Bernadette, it's going to be next year, right? Okay, all right. Hallelujah, excellent. All right, this is turning into a sermon. But you want to come back and show that you have moved the dial on young type 2. You want to show that you have done the same in the hybrid closed adults. That's the progress you want. So that's important. I'll finish there. I'll probably leave that up. But I think we've been a wonderful sort of audience to listen to. But I always want to say that we have shown success as a nation. As a country, you will go to meeting after meeting saying that the gap isn't closing. And it's very disheartening, isn't it? Because in this audience is full of people who are genuinely trying to make that difference, whatever the color of their skin. And it's incredibly disheartening. So I wanted to show you some things where it does work, right? And you have all done it, right? So it's possible. And I think you need to challenge, you need to push, and you can do it in a respectful way by saying that, look, I just don't believe we are doing enough to make the dial shift. And that sort of conversation needs to happen. So I'll finish there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Partha. And who is the quote from?
Jürgen Klopp.
Oh, it's Klopp. Okay. Jenny?
Sorry, I just had a question for Partha. When you report type 1 diabetes, you always use HbA1c for measurement. We know sickle cell affects our population, and the HbA1c doesn't work for them. So what is the criteria you use to measure their success in
So one of the things we're going to move towards, one of the things that we can move towards, which is quite powerful because we've got such a good uptake of CGM now, is to look at concepts of time in range, which I think would be a really good way of doing it. So we're very aware of that gap, okay? And it's a universal world struggle. How do you do it? Do you measure factors? What do you do? So time in range, we can't really go to that till we've got universal coverage, which we've got to now. So that's something that we're going to talk with the teams as to what we can do to get those data sets out as well, because that will give us a really good marker as to where we are. So, and I think we'll be probably one of the first countries to be able to do that, to get to the time in range discussion. So that's going to be the strategy going forwards, I reckon.
Thank you so much. Really, always interesting to listen to you. And this is, I don't know, maybe a philosophical question for you.
Love philosophy. It's the time of the day, man.
What is then the next biggest challenge for type 1 diabetes in this country?
So how do you look at hybrid closed loop? Hybrid closed loop is, I always say, the best thing that science can provide at the moment beyond a cure. That's what it is. You'll move to the fully closed loop, I reckon, the next 2-3 years. Now, we are in a quite advantageous position because our ground is set. It'll be just about upgrading the systems. The next biggest challenge, I reckon, will be when people will talking about the screening programs, a lot of the chatter going on about it. But I don't think there is anything huge coming through. There's a lot of noise around stem cell, but we have heard that noise since I was a trainee, if I'm very honest. There's some positive noises here. There's lots of research being pumped into immunotherapy. Interests me. That's the way it's been looked at. But if I look at the horizon, so to speak, I don't think there's something jumping out in the next 4 or 5 years. So my view is that people should just focus on getting the hybrid closed loops absolutely driven through, and then in time upgrade to the fully closed, and then wait for the next big thing to happen. I think the bigger challenge, if I'm very honest, is probably in type 2. It's not in type 1. We are very, I would say, let the system now do its work in type 1, and people really need to focus their policy areas into type 2.
Hello, thanks for your talk. It was really good. I have a question.
Do you have a feedback form? Can you hand one to this lady?
My question is, so I work in York and they're rolling out the hybrid closed loops really well. But we're now hitting a challenge where they're saying that if all these patients are now on hybrid closed loops, we don't have enough staff to manage the aftermath, i.e. the DSNs, the dietetic department. We just don't have any money. And as a result, we're finding the DSNs are now pulling back because if they leave, then we can't recruit back into the post, which is now going to have a knock-on effect of this rollout. And it feels like we're stalemate. You know, we're just at this point. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, 2 things. One is we haven't released the money for year 2. So hopefully that should come as a nice surprise for people to sort of help a little bit. I think the second thing I'm very keen on is to actually bank on industry. So we are actually paying industry a little bit more than we agreed so they can help teams. So that's something we really want to go hard on, because if I, for example, have a group of people who wants to go on pump X or loop X, I would basically phone the company up and say, put it on, set it up, and let me know when you're done.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we need to really bank on those sort of things to get things moving, is what I would say. But let the money for year 2 and year 3 come out. I think that will give you a little bit of breathing room as you go across the board. And I've already told Fulia this, the pediatricians won't have anything to do anymore very soon. So they might be coming around to help you. Is that right, Fulia?
And can I just ask one more thing? In regards to type 2, so I know you do so much work in type 1 diabetes. However, type 2 diabetes, you know, the funding seems to be quite sparse, and it seems to be the area that gets cut the quickest. Are you planning on doing any work in type 2 or any recommendations? Or,
It's just not my circus,
okay.
if I'm honest. Not that to say that anybody's a monkey there. But I think that's the conversation that needs to happen, okay? I think a lot of focus, quite rightly, has been on remission, which has been. I think the team is working hard to convince the powers that be there needs to be a lot more focus on type 2. And I think quite rightly as well, as I've kept on saying, that if you want to change the dynamics of the population, you need to go hard at the younger age groups, especially young type 2. And, you know, if I had a magic wand, I would really pump in there a lot of support. Young type 2 is where I would go for it, I would say, because that's how you change the dynamics of a country. In the higher age groups, I think we really need to start looking at drugs as disease-modifying drugs. I think it's very important we move away from glucocentric drugs. So if you're looking at SGLT2s and GLP-1s, so I work in the community as well, and I look after type 2. We are very clear that these are disease-modifying drugs. You're trying to change the directions of kidneys and hearts and stuff. There's plenty of evidence now. So I think we should start focusing on those 2 areas. It would, for me, if you could get most of the type 2 population on a protective drug that stops their kidneys from going downtown, you're saving so much downstream. So my view would be, I think there's a lot of focus in the young type 2, quite rightly, and I think it will change, it will come. So you see a lot more of type 1 because I talk about it. That's my honest opinion. I'm everywhere. and I deliberately do it. And it's to raise the profile because I'm incredibly passionate about type 1 as what needs to happen. And because I beat my drum all the time about how amazing everything is. That's part of the strategy, but I think the similar will happen. I think once this calms down, you will see a lot more in type 2 coming forward.
Could you also clarify the point about it's me over here, I've moved, DVLA and accepting CGM?
Yeah, so for not for heavy good vehicles yet, that's will be under review. Pratik Chaudhary is now, I think, the lead chair of that, and they'll be reviewed at. So not for heavy goods vehicles at the present moment. Normal vehicles, yes, but not for heavy goods. Heavy goods still is up for usual pattern. It's been asked, that question has been asked, and the DVL will be looking into it about the efficacy and safety of it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Partha. Just to echo what everyone said, lovely talk. Your humor always makes it a great listen to. In terms of CGM, from talking from a primary care perspective, you did say on your slide that the work on CGM is done. I guess that's type 1 you're talking
Yep.
about. Type 2, how close are we to actually getting CGMs in every type 2, if at all possible?
For all type 2s?
Yes.
Okay, so remember what I said, think like a patient, act like a taxpayer. So do you want everybody with type 2 to get it if they were your close and near relative? The answer probably is yes, because you don't want to prick your finger. Maybe, maybe not. I think have that question in your mind. Should the taxpayer fund it? According to NICE, not quite yet at the price point it is. So that's what they've said, right? Is it going to change going forwards? I suspect it will, because I think industry are definitely interested in that space. I think there's a wider question for ICS systems, and which I've already said to them, is that there are three guidelines out there on CGM, NG17, NG18, and NG28. And the question I always have for ICSs is that if you've done NG17 and 18 lock, stock, and barrel, which people have, that's why we got that, why haven't you done NG28? It's the same guidelines. So I think I would focus on that. I think it's going to be something the NICE will be asked to review again. I suspect for that industry will need to do some price move on that one. And that's the reality where we are, right? You know, as I've said this to industry all the time, is that you make the price move and you will get the benefits of it in your profit by volume. And that's where it will go.
I have a question, Partha. Firstly, thank you very much for the talk, informative, hard-hitting, and always make points that stick with people when they leave. So thank you for that. Thank you for showing up for this cause. But I wanted to ask a question of your grid of 1, 2, 3, 4. What percentage of people do you see in each quadrant? Because, and for this particular issue, because one of the biggest pushbacks we get is it should be equality, same for everybody. We don't really want to do anything different for people. That's reverse racism, etc. So is that, am I just seeing the small amount of people, or you see it a lot?
Well, those people are idiots. Because I think these are all excuses not to do the right thing, right? I've had people say that to me. I just don't accept those things. I've been like, okay, all this chatter means nothing when the data hasn't shifted. You can give me any gunk you want. I just want the data to move. Show me the data moves, I'll accept what you're saying. If your strategy of we all need to hold our hands and sing Kumbaya and we'll all be better works, then why hasn't it worked in other areas? So I always shut it down straight away and I just go like, okay, where has the data shifted? I think that's what you need to keep on saying to people. Show me that your strategy is X, lovely. Has it made the difference? If it hasn't made the difference, your strategy is wrong. And I think that's something that we have to say publicly all the time. So if you look at the 4 quadrants, I'll be very honest, in this country, I would say, if you take the example, let's say racism, right? I would say the majority actually, right, is probably between 1 and 2, right? Group 4 is, I know we see the hard edge of that on Twitter and social media, etc. But I always say this, right? I wouldn't be standing here doing what I'm doing if this was a whole-out racist country. You know, I am leading a national service for 9 years, right? And I'm not doing it because somebody's done me a favor, right? I've done it because of what I sort of... So I think a lot of people are in 1 and 2, and most people, when they're shown the data in a respectful way, rather than a data which shows that you white people are all just a bunch of racists, I think that shuts off people when you do that conversation. I think you need to have that going, what do you think about the data? How does it appeal to you as a person? And I think you have more, one, it's a group two, will show me a bit more data, show me where I can help. I think that does shift. That's my personal opinion after working with, I mean, as I said, you know, we always will have individuals with their biases and stuff. We just need to know how do we shepherd them out.
Hi. Thanks for your great presentation. I just wanted to ask about CGM and kidney patients, particularly hemodialysis patients. They are covered in the guideline, but the uptake or even the access to providing that is not, there's quite a big variation. So you have very low uptake in hemodialysis population, and you know in terms of glycemic management, things are very tricky once you're on insulin and dialysis. The ambulance call out, the A&E attendances, all this are really quantifiable, expense, but we're not really investing enough in integrated diabetes and kidney care.
100%, yeah.
And then what we've left off in the guideline is the peritoneal dialysis patients who would not be eligible, although their kind of struggle is the same. So I just wondered whether somebody's looking at that and how can we kind of bridge that gap? Thank you.
So personally, my time in NHS England or central roles is probably, I'm in my last run, I would say. It's been a good ride, right? But I think these are points that I would suggest that the Renal Society makes. I'll give you a very good, because you have to make it to us, right? As a team, and there's a new team in place with Claire and Mark. And I think it's a very good point, and I would personally support it. I've got a renal unit. We're in Portsmouth. We've got a tertiary renal unit. And I know Ian Cranston, who does our renal clinics, he rarely has any issues, but that's because of the system we have. So if there is a variation on it, so I always say to people, if you feel that things are unjust or unfair, you have to raise it with us. And I think that's quite important. I say this, keep on saying, and I will help, right? I always try and help. I'll make a few connections, make a few calls. I'll give a very good example. Evelyn's in the audience here. We work together on the eyes, right? About what should we do? People are going on hybrid closed loops. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Are they going to go blind? And nobody knew the answer. So we worked all together to try and come up with a pathway that would work. So when I reached out, she went like, yeah, it's a good question, and we don't know the answer. What should we do? So I think that's the approach I would have, is that I think if people reach out, it's easier for us to, okay, let's pick it up. Sounds like a really decent question and stuff. That's what I would say. So another example is, do we involve that in the future in the GIRF process? When you're talking about teams, what's happening with the dialysis units, etc., those sort of things.
Thanks.
Thanks, Partha. Just a quick question. My question relates to data. One of the challenges that we face in rolling out HCL is data.
Yep.
It's extremely poor across the board.
Yep.
Is there any plan to do anything central to help to support that?
So the data quality in pediatrics is pretty amazing.
That's for the adults.
Yeah. And the adult side, I think so we have been pressing a lot recently, and that's something which is a bugbear for us, because I think now is more important because the data is connected to the payment. So that's something that we have got dedicated people in the team looking at, Fiona and others. So watch this space, I would say. We're very well aware of the data, because without the data quality, we're also a bit short, because we can't do the power calculation. So that's something which is a strong work in hand. We've got a work stream on it, so we shall see how it plays out.
Thank you very much. Can we thank Partha again, please?